experimenting with doing a couple podcasts on the road, and I'm here with Andy. Andy, did you listen to my last podcast?
I may have. Was it the Kevin and Kevin show?
That was the most recent solo one where I actually referenced you.
No.
Okay.
No, this is flattering.
Because I'm certain I butchered your last name. So tell me, what is the correct way to pronounce your last name?
Well, even that's a loaded question because we learned it's not correct, but we say Bano.
Okay.
All right. So if we were getting calls at dinner time growing up, we knew that it was a sales call if they just completely butchered the name. But then we learned somebody was doing some family tree research, and it turns out it's supposed to be more like Benal. But
oh, really? All right.
No Benals pronounce it Benal. We say Bano.
Bano.
So,
all right. All right.
Yes.
It's the Americanized version of it, right?
Exactly. They added vowels. It was the whole thing.
Yeah. Fantastic.
How can we complicate an already complicated name?
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because then I completely missed your name on like two different tries. So, and I was saying it's funny because with my name being what it is, I grew up like basically everybody butchering my name in every possible way. I heard like every version of Klinkenberg, and every nickname of it that you could imagine. And so I was always like really sensitive to how to pronounce people's names. Anyway, so take a listen, and I think you'll actually enjoy that one because I was kind of riffing off of a bit of our Substack back and forth, and I think that'll be up your alley. So let's start first a little bit. Make sure people know who you are and what you're doing at CNU. What's your where do you live? What's your professional background?
My background is follow the Messy City podcast wherever it leads me.
All right, we're in for a good plug right at the front.
So the short, I'm always looking for the tweetable version of a thing. So for my background, what I'm doing right now is I am a storyteller for hire. My background is 25 years in infrastructure in some way or another.
Mm-hmm.
So I tell people that my parents helped me buy a degree in civil engineering, and then I didn't civil engineer anything. I started in transportation, which was another thing that I should not have started because as a teenage boy, I was not going to do anything remotely close to what my dad did. My dad worked for the Federal Transit Administration.
Oh, okay.
So I would tell myself, well, he's in transit, and in transportation, it's different.
Yeah.
And then the older I got, working for consultants over the years in various forms of transportation work, the Venn diagram of our professional networks, my dad and I kept just overlapping to the point where it's a near circle. So my work was always a blend of transportation planning, traffic engineering, that kind of thing, depending on who you work for. It goes by different labels, but I'm a people watcher. And I grew up in Northern Virginia, where we understand traffic. Everybody's stuck in traffic.
Yeah.
The Beltway's always expanding. But a mixture of intersection analysis and just big picture people movement. Where are people coming from? Where are they headed? And friends of mine who are in this industry will scratch their heads sometimes like, well, how do you end up with new urbanists, and how do you end up with these other groups that are very designy, and I'm not designing anything, or how do you end up with these more philosophical groups? It all makes sense to me because, like, if I look over my shoulder at my career path, I'm just always asking, what do I want to do when I grow up, if I grow up? But I'm looking in transportation terms. I'm looking for that intersection of things that I enjoy doing and things that there is a market for and things that I am decent at. Or if you were to take an architectural vertical view of it, it would be like talent stacking or that kind of concept. Like, what are a handful of things that I like and I'm decent at, because nobody's ever going to be the best at everything or any particular thing. Even Michael Jordan only had a tight window, right?
Yeah.
But then how can you use that to stand out? So for me, it's over the years, it morphed always in transportation and planning, like figuring out how do people move around? Where are we coming from, going to? And what's the point of it? Is the point to funnel us through in cars for a particular point in time? Or is the point really, I got to get to work? Or I've got to get to this conference, or I got to get to this coffee shop. Because then maybe you're in a car, but maybe you're not. It's a very different way of looking at the world. So that's the kind of work that I was doing, just asking those questions. And then I discovered through trying to pursue contracts with on behalf of firms, business development kind of stuff, that the art of persuasion is something that we who were taught engineering or architecture or construction or planning, we didn't learn that stuff. Mm-hmm. So as kids, we were always trying to persuade each other, anybody with any background, right? Like, can Kevin come out and play? He's doing homework. Now, can he do homework later? You know what I mean? Like, everything is persuasion later. And then at some point, through a combination of school and work, it's sort of massaged out of us, or sometimes battered out of us. Like, no, this is, grown-ups are supposed to be conformists. So everything's more like conformity rather than just bouncing ideas around and persuading each other to do things. And so when it came to very practical things like, our business needs more business. How does our firm or team look any different than the other firms or teams? Yeah. And the truth was, I was asking friends on these selection panels, they don't look any different. Like, everybody puts up the same banners to say, best place to work, top E&R firm, what you list your fact sheet. And on the panel, they don't really care about that stuff. You're there for a purpose in their mind. The selection panel is thinking, we have funding to figure out this corridor through our city or our county, and we need some experts to help us think through this and then design it. And the consulting teams would come in just thinking about themselves rather than the problem they were there to solve. Yeah, so sure. Not that they're coming in haughty, like, I'm the best, but that's how everything came across. And so I happened to like propaganda and advertising, and it was fascinating to me that I who didn't like learning that I was not logical or rational. I was learning, we are very easily persuaded in some ways, not about everything, but like, why do you choose this brand over this brand? It's the exact same price. Why Prego over Ragu? Maybe there's a little bit of a flavor difference, but not a lot. Best Buy, Circuit City, Ford, Chevy, in any product category. And so I was reading more and more about not only the history of public relations and propaganda, but also the techniques that advertisers and copywriters would use. And then I would, if something registered, and there was always something registering, like, yeah, that does seem right. That I have done. Now that I read that, yes, I have fallen into that. I would try it in presentations or proposals, and it would work. Work in the sense, like, I would ask later, hey, what was that? Why did our team stand out? And it wasn't about me as an individual. It was, oh yeah, your team, you had that story arc that aligned with our project. So just basic things like having our theme and our pitch aligned to exactly what we knew their pain points were. Mm-hmm. And so last few years, that's been my sweet spot, is helping people, small businesses, organizations, nonprofits, technology companies that are in infrastructure or mobility in some way, figure out what are we trying to say here? Who's our audience? Mm-hmm. What's the form that we deliver these things in? And my bias is, I'm here at Congress for New Urbanism. Mm-hmm. I want happy, healthy communities. I want people to be able, if they want to walk or ride a bike to get around, I want that. That's my extreme bias. So yeah. That's the long-winded answer to your short question.
That's okay. Hey, it's funny. You make me, like, as a parent of small children, you make me feel a little bit bad, because now I realize, like, I've got a 5-year-old who is exactly what you say. She is a negotiator extreme. It's unbelievable. We think, oh my God, she's going to be a lawyer or something. The way she already just negotiates with us and bargains, it's incredible. And I feel like we're probably trying to beat that out of her too much, which maybe we shouldn't do.
Gotta channel that. Yeah, it's fun. My boys are older now. They're 17 and 19, but it doesn't go away.
Yeah. So So that's interesting. So that you, basically, you work on your own to essentially help other people with messaging. And would that be like a shorter way to say it?
Yes, in a sense, although I don't like to be alone, Kevin. So
Yeah.
I always want to work with teams and other people. But yes,
Yeah.
I freelance. So I will work with a nonprofit or a small business, those types of
Uh-huh.
people I was listing. But yeah, they help people figure out their messaging, and it's different purposes. So sometimes it's ghostwriting. Sometimes
Yeah.
a technology company needs to figure out how do we pitch our stuff. Like this is going to be transformative for a transit agency. They have old timey technology. City Hall has no idea where the buses are.
Yeah.
This tech will help, and they start talking in ones and zeros, and the average person's like, I don't understand what they're saying. They sound very intelligent, but I don't get it. So helping them get to the point. What is it you do? Who are the buyers? And then how do we get that message to them? That's like just the organizations. And a lot of the work, one reason why I found so much joy in that kind of work was through public engagement projects in regular infrastructure meetings, because those were a circus. I mean, and I'm fortunate in that I got thrown into public meetings from the very start as an intern while I was still in college, because it was cheap labor for corporates, right? You've got a big corridor study. We need bodies to carry around the boards and the maps and stuff to get to the middle school on a Tuesday night when no one's going to show up anyway, and put everything up, set up all the tripods. So I loved that because it was a hang. Like you just, even if only a handful of people come, I would just ask questions, and I didn't know anything about urban design or what was good or what was good or bad about traffic analysis or reasonable or unreasonable. I was just asking lots of questions, and then what I would find was sometimes people come to these meetings seem to know way more about this than I do, and I work for this company. And then other times, these people have no idea what this project could do or is going to do to their property. Sometimes, like you have no idea. You're asking about street trees. They're going to take your backyard to widen the road. But that it's different deliveries with helping people with storytelling. It can be kind of help the business get more business, but then also helping helping people see how our silly human brains work, and then work with it. Like I don't pretend I can change people how human beings are wired, but it's helped me a ton, and I know it's helped others a ton to just think, all right, if this is what we know from psychology and neuroscience, the stuff that we never studied, but if we learn a little bit of that and apply it to our technical work, man, it makes things so much better. Makes conversations with normies so much easier.
You ever read Why We Buy, Paco Underhill's book at all?
No, but this sounds like something right up my alley.
It's a classic, very interesting book, and it's something that I know impacted retailers a lot. But he and others have studied for years, almost like the science of how easy it is to manipulate people from a retailing, from a purchasing standpoint. Really interesting, and I think you had one or two other books that were along those lines. But there was I remember years ago, my first introduction to all that was Bob Gibbs the retailing expert in New Urbanism, used to present some of his work, and he would talk about how little subtle things, like if you walk into a store and there's a table like right in the middle, there's like basically they can prove there's like about like an 80% chance that you're going to go to the right, and if there's like a certain color painted on the back wall of the store, there's like a certain percentage likelihood that you're going to walk all the way to the back of the store. It's really fascinating stuff, but it's kind of along those lines. It is funny to dive into how our monkey brains are still pretty easily manipulated.
It's funny you said, and maybe some of this content was coming from that book, and I didn't even realize it. But I wrote recently about an element of that, and just thinking the grocery store as a Sim City kind of thing. Like planners talk all about Sim City and just
Mm-hmm.
Computer games that are like that, city building, grocery stores, like you said, they figured that stuff out because it matters, right? Especially the bigger the chain, the more that stuff matters because they want to be able to copy paste across the country or the region that they're operating in. And so all the kind of people movement things where they nudge behavior, it's not. I mean, it includes specific product placement, like the type of product and which, if it's up high or down low, like all those kinds of things come into play too. And then of course labels on packaging and why you're more inclined to choose one box versus another. But just the people movement thing is fascinating to me. Like, why planners or urban designers, like, read some of the research and books that are out about retail design, and especially I think grocery, because there's so many different options within. Like, you might just be going there for the dairy stuff, or you might just be going for this other, or you might be doing the full cart experience. And if traffic calming is a great connection, I think, with that, because if you're walking down a packed condiments aisle, you're going very slowly, whether you're carrying a basket or pushing a cart. You're watching and expecting anybody to back up into you at any time. You're trying to make eye contact. It's just all that you're and then you add kids into the mix. It's a whole other circus, right?
Well, and it's like, I always think Costco is just, they're brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And it's like, I go into Costco, usually have like 2 or 3 things I want to get, and I can't leave the store without spending $200, and if I have my kids with me, forget it, because they're going to sample every food up and down the aisle. I mean, they are absolutely, really, really brilliant about how they merchandise their store and everything. It reminds me, it's funny you mentioned grocery stores, because back when I was in architecture school a million years ago, I took some classes in the urban planning department, which, like, at University of Kansas, the urban planning department was a graduate level program that was actually technically separate from architecture, but we would take classes. I took some classes in it because I was interested in planning, and I had one professor, really interesting guy that I liked and learned a lot from, but like he was a all out Marxist. Like, it was like a Marxist urban planning course that I took. It was fascinating. But he actually wrote a book about grocery stores, which I don't think I ever actually got all the way through. But he dove into a lot of the details that you're talking about, like specifically analyzing, how things are placed where they are and why they are set up that way. And there is incredible science behind all of it.
Where I find value in that is like with the aisles. I mean, you mentioned Costco, like compared to the tight aisle with people bumping into you potentially versus a wide open Costco aisle where you get there at a certain time of day and there's no one there. And so you can, like, your kid can run and jump onto the cart and, zoom through like a go-kart, right?
Yeah.
You act differently when the aisle is wide. So traffic engineers and road designers, because again, they didn't learn about cognition and how just behavior science. They don't, and I'm not blaming them. I'm one of them. I studied civil engineering. It was like a little bit of soil mechanics, a little bit of structures, all these different things. You don't learn these things, and I find those types of real world connections useful because road designers and traffic engineers will swear up and down that design does not influence behavior. They're like, I'm just following the green book or whatever guide, right? And they say, like, this is how it is. It's not as though I don't understand why people are speeding. We're going to put a giant sign out on the street that says, please slow down or drive like your kids live here. And you tell them it's because of the design. Your design influences bad behavior. Nuh-uh. It goes back to the kid persuasion. Nuh-uh. But if you connect, you just talk through the grocery store. Well, of course, if it's narrow, I'm going to walk slower. Well, how is that any different than out on your street? Clear zone, sight distance, all of the things about designing the built environment. There are other things in life where you could make those connections and go, oh, okay, I understand how design influences my behavior. But I think it's helpful to find those things and then talk to them. You might not. We all know it's hard to persuade any of us if for any particular thing. Once we think we really know something, it gets harder and harder to change our mind about that thing, of course. But just connecting the dots, like grocery aisle width versus your lane width.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, 10 feet does make a big difference from 12 and 13 feet,
Yeah.
and even 9 feet. Like, and why is that? Why do we slow down?
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, it's very different conversations from there. Like, is it a good idea to slow down? Is this an environment where we want things slowed down and calmed?
Yeah. I remember working on a project years ago that I will not name now in case anybody's listening that could be offended. But it was a new community, and we had a particular street that we were designing that connected to a community college campus. This was in a suburban area, and we had this really, what I thought was just unbelievable back and forth with the city engineer about the design of this street that led to the community college. We wanted, from a design perspective, urban design perspective, both sides of the street were to be flanked by like townhouses. And so this was a walkable community we were designing, and we were hoping there would be townhouses or apartments along both sides of the street. We wanted it to be just a really comfortable street. It actually was designed with like a center median, like a landscape median. And the engineers really fought us to make the street wider and wider than we really wanted it to be. And they wanted the lanes. I think we had originally programmed them as like 10-foot lanes, and they wanted like 12, 13 feet minimum. And the rationale was, well, there's all these young people who go to the community college campus, and they're terrible drivers. So we need to make the road wider for them. And I was like, doesn't that mean you're just actually encouraging them to be even worse drivers and like speed through this area? I mean,
it's awful and it's normal. I say one of my favorite places to say this is Twitter, because it can be so inflammatory over there. But also my happy place. Never, ever, ever let the fire department design streets and intersections. And that rubs people the wrong way constantly, because it's one of those social things where you think, well, the fire department, teachers, like those are groups of people you're never supposed to criticize ever, or else. Don't ever let the fire department design streets, because they do the same thing that you just described. They're like, well, we got bigger trucks this year.
Yeah.
And we're going to need a bigger intersection.
Yeah.
We are going to need, we recommend, or we support the Public Works Department in their push to add another left turn lane here, and this intersection should be bigger. And they lose sight of the problem that if we do these things, if we design around your trucks and design around your trucks going faster to respond to 911 calls, there will be more 911 calls. Yeah. It's as simple as that.
I know it's a frustrating discussion we've had, for a long time. So Andy, you have this great Substack called Urbanism Speakeasy. How long have you been doing this? You've been doing it for quite a while, if I remember right.
Yeah, and actually, CNU. I'm constantly giving CNU credit for me connecting dots around it. It started as a podcast or just after West Palm Beach, whatever CNU that was.
God, that was a while
ago. yeah. 10-ish years ago. Mm-hmm. I'm not looking at the internet, even though we have it handy, but a while ago. And it came out of, I guess it was around 2012. Just there are a lot of kind of open group sessions at CNU, or it used to be anyway, where you would kind of vote with your feet around different topics and what are people interested in talking. So at one point, there was a table of us we were just talking about podcasts that we liked. Mm-hmm. And that ended up it started with comedy podcasts, and then it ended up with kind of business and marketing podcasts. And then, well, we're at Congress for New Urbanism, or who's listening to any New Urbanism podcast? And it was crickets. Like we mm-hmm. couldn't come up with stuff. And then beyond that, it was, okay, here are a couple. Well, do you like them? Well, it's not, it was like this polite kind of backing away. And so I thought, I didn't just think, I said it out loud. We should make a podcast. And so then it was like, yeah. And so that rally of, we should do this. And I said, no, really, we should do this. I'll start. So I followed up over the next couple of weeks with a handful of people, because my idea for mine was I don't want it to just be my voice, but I wanted to use this. Part of what drew me to Congress and Urbanism was just the battle of ideas was constant, and I love that. That was something that was missing from other organizations. Just that 2 or 3 very close friends could be violent with their ideas, very normal in every other aspect of life, but for the same goal that was healthy communities, happy places, vibrant places. And so with that same kind of North Star or mission, they could come at topics from different points of view and argue what are the best paths to get there. It was fantastic. And so I wanted that for the podcast, to be able to think through these things. Again, I hadn't studied them, I hadn't learned them, but I wanted to find interesting people and talk with them and ask them questions like, how did you first start? Maybe it was tactical urbanism, crosswalks, that kind of thing. The Guerrilla Gardener in Los Angeles was a great story. And if other people, it turns out, were busy with other things, so I ended up turning it into an interview show. So rather than a co-host with another CNU person, it then ended up being me just doing interviews. And then over the years, there were a couple of times where I had to just put it on pause. Work gets busy when whether you're working corporate or solo. And then recently I brought it back in writing form because I write a ton. You are telling or you can tell the words don't stop coming out of my face, but then also I write a lot too. And so I just figured I'll keep this writing, keep the brand of Urbanism Speakeasy, but I want to bring back the podcast. And I love Substack. You and I could probably sound like a Substack commercial because it can function sort of as our Amazon, whether you're delivering something in short form, long form, a book, podcast, video, all those things, just right there together. It's so easy. And then being able to have access to people through a mailing list, so important.
Yeah. I mean, Substack's been a godsend, and I switched my blog over earlier this year, and before I started this podcast and everything, and I've been looking at it for a while, and obviously been a reader and follow a lot of people on there, but it's pretty amazing to me how quickly it's become, a thing. It's not like there weren't other sites that did something similar, but Substack really parlayed it. I think part of it is it's super easy to use, has a very simple, clean format, and it allows creators to monetize their work much, much more easily than anything else. So that's been great.
It's intuitive. It's easy. I think, and this was one thing that over the years I've constantly encouraged other people, even if they don't like writing. And I hated English class. I liked, if there was a class in class clowniness, I would want that. Like, what's the writing and speaking associated with that? But through all my coursework in college, my absolute favorite class was public speaking, which was just like a half credit. I mean, it was barely a class, but I loved it. And also I wasn't thinking ahead to, this is real world of all the things, of all the classes. I took it at a community college. The teacher was fantastic. Just because his goal, his goal was to help us be public speakers rather than I'm some tenured professor. Oh, they stuck me with this lame class.
Yeah.
And it was fantastic. And so whether you think of yourself as a writer or not, I constantly say, write, publish, repeat, which I stole from somebody else who published a book with that title. But it's so helpful. Also, talk, repeat. It's so helpful to understand your own work better, understand it just from a practical business point of view. What is it my clients are really trying to do? Or what is it my project is trying to do? When you write your own scope of work, like something is very basic, business basic as that, just writing regularly helps with that. It also helps when you're giving a presentation to planning commission. You're working with a developer on a project and you're trying to pitch this idea of converting an old mansion to a duplex or a fourplex. Just having written about these things gets you to the point where anecdotes and analogies just start to kind of ooze out of you when you least expect it. And so years ago when I had my own domain, I still do, but I didn't mind that barrier to entry to set it up, have hosting, all that kind of stuff, have my own blog over there. But something like that's a kind of thing that a lot of people, it's a self-selection process, right? So a lot of architects, designers, planners, these types are our people here at CNU. They're not gonna do that, most of them. But something like a Substack, it's easy to say, to put the peer pressure on a friend and be like, look, all you gotta do, log in. You don't even have to publish to the world. You don't even have to tell people that you have it.
Right.
Just do this, set up an account, and just start writing. And it's so good. Whether you share it with anybody ever, or it's just for your own kind of journaling benefit, it's fantastic.
Yeah, it really, and I think you're right. I mean, it really does help you clarify just your own thoughts and just get better, and get better about talking to other people, especially talking to people outside, our tiny little world about the issues that we care about. So you publish pretty regularly then. You're like, what, 2 or 3, 4 times a week you're putting something out generally?
Yes, although you asked me last week, and I would have said I would have been holding my breath because I went about a week without publishing. So this is an area where I have to get more disciplined in thinking in advance, because one of the advantages of Substack is being able to schedule posts.
Yeah.
And I need to get ahead of my own curve so that I have things lined up in the queue for a more regular publishing schedule. Because from an email marketing point of view, this long time studied science of there are ways to figure out and analyze when people are most likely to open your emails. And so it's one, most important to have an email list. Two, that people are interested enough to read it and act on it sometimes. And so that aspect, I am a work in progress on that. Part of the reason, though, I publish a lot, and this is, I don't think there's any rule that your schedule should be once a week or 3 times a week or whatever. But the words don't stop. So for me, I might as well. And it's all related in some way to, I say the tagline is something like simple truths about city planning, something along those lines. And so for me, the schedule is more like not forcing the issue of I need to publish 3 times a week or 4 times a week, but it's something's hitting the news like parking reform or zoning reform. There's something that's catching people's attention. I'll test an idea or a phrase or something, a provocative angle on Twitter, and see how that works or doesn't work. And then use that as the basis, kind of the seed. And then that will grow into something that I'll write for the email list. Because I'm just assuming, one, even on Twitter, that stuff moves so fast, people aren't going to see it. I'm assuming no one will see it. Even if a lot of people statistically see it, like my readers aren't. So I can bring that kind of topic. It's not just, oh, you already said that one time. Yeah. But you can go deeper a little bit. So the schedule for me is it probably will be about 3 or 4 times a week. This month will definitely be busier because yesterday was day 1 of crowdfunding campaign for documentary that I'm putting out, and I've got 30 days for that sucker.
What's the documentary?
Kevin, I'm glad you asked. So one thing that came out of the idea book is from several years ago was the premise of a doctor. People were sending me articles that got me thinking along these lines, but a doctor prescribes to a senior citizen, you should ride a bicycle once a week and you should walk once a day. I'm prescribing you this, basically active living a little bit. That patient, that senior citizen will walk outside, look around at the streets, and they can't fill their prescription. Why? So if you were to blend Aaron Brockovich, Super Size Me, and Blues Brothers, like in my mind, that is the quest that I'm on. I know a lot of the answers of why things happen because with background in planning and knowing policy and that sort of thing, land use planning. But I've been learning a ton about the direct connections between mental health, especially, and the built environment. And so what I want to do with this documentary is shine a giant spotlight on, for now, the tentative title is White Collar Epidemic, because you've got these two, they don't think of themselves as at-war white-collar groups, but you've got the medical profession that says, here's what's good for the human body and the human mind. these things. Then you've got the infrastructure profession. They go, cool story, bro. You don't get that.
Yeah.
We're designing stuff that does not fit us as human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And so, or, a simple way of saying it is that streets and buildings are by design bad for us. And I don't like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so the more I looked into that, just coming from the idea of writing about it, I was trying to find documentaries about it because I'm a sucker for documentaries. I mean, I'll treat documentaries like podcasts. I'll listen to it at 1.5 speed.
Yeah.
But there's nothing out there. And so I thought, all right, this is another one of those things I like to say. I'll say things out loud to help make it happen. So I said it out loud enough times that and enough people are like, yeah, you should make that. Like, all right, I'm gonna make that. So I did some pre-interviews with about 20 people, which is way too many, but I did this on purpose. Just I wanted to get a bunch of different perspectives from the medical side and the infrastructure and planning and design side of just how bad it is, and things can get better in the end. I mean, I'm an eternal optimist, but I'm also right. Like, things can get better in the end.
Yeah.
If you all through recorded history, we see for all kinds of things. There's no reason to be a cynic about the built environment. So what I want to do is what I'm doing the crowdfunding for is so that I can make this thing and then take it. I think it lends itself, especially for those of us like CNU types and advocacy groups, a roadshow type thing where people need to see this and then talk about it. Like, so whether it's a couple of us on a panel or it's a local bike walk group and a couple of psychologists or neuroscientists or that kind of thing, depending on the group. Maybe we're in a university town, maybe we're in a small town in the middle of the country. But these issues, we have no idea how bad it is. Like, you and I know as designers, we know some of the things like traffic crashes on wide streets. You add lanes, you widen out the road, you're gonna have more crashes. So that's physical health, of course, like injuries and death in that sense. But for me anyway, that was basically the limit of my thought on the connection between health and infrastructure. But it's so much worse. So things like anxiety and depression, and even just your ability to come up with ideas, your creativity, your memory. Dementia is one of the things in the U.S. that is regularly brought up as why haven't we moved the needle in the medical community on figuring this stuff out?
Yeah.
And then you learn, or you will learn after this documentary, that the spaces around us, the way we interact with the environment, has a direct connection on things like dementia. Like, well, what if we built things a little bit differently? What if we act on that knowledge? So these are things that, on the one hand, they can seem overwhelming and impossible. Like, how do you rebuild the entire United States? Right. I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting once you see a thing is causing these problems, then block by block, property by property, locality by locality, who has their own zoning code and other things, you can make these changes locally. And to me, that's exciting and invigorating. Like, you don't have to wait for a certain person to be president, or if you're playing politics, it doesn't matter if your team is in charge. This is just, if we can focus on the health aspect, none of the other stuff matters. Yeah.
So how does somebody who's never produced a documentary go about producing a documentary?
You just do it. You just do it. So I've made shorts before. I've made especially mockumentaries. I was talking about this at one of the CNU dinners, that the very first one came out of a dare because I was, after having worked for so many years on public infrastructure projects, I was just role playing as the different people who I've been these people. So like the traffic engineer, the traffic modeler, the land use planner, the politician, the urban planning professor, just all these types. So I was doing this one person show kind of thing. and so the dare was Josh Padgett, who's I don't know if he'll even remember this if he hears it, but he was starting the New Urbanism Film Festival, and he goes, I've got a deadline coming up. You should submit. I was like, submit what? He goes, you should do that. You should submit that. So it was like 3 days away. So over 1 or 2 nights, I wrote a script and filmed myself just in the basement with very simple interviewing myself, dressed slightly differently. I was like 5 or 6 different people, and it was just it was called Walk Don't Walk, and it was all about walkability. It was a very tight focus on the inability to walk. At the time, I don't remember how old my older boy was, but he was the star who at the very beginning of it. But anyway, that was my jump into it. But I'm not bashful about these things, and I'm definitely a ready, fire, aim kind of person.
Yeah.
But I'm not treating this like this needs to be the most polished thing you've ever seen. But we all have access to cameras. Even just a basic DSLR, there are so many things you can do with it. We've all probably made project videos of some kind, maybe not 20 years ago, but certainly in the last few years. It's just, I look at it slightly differently. If somebody says, why would you do this? I would say, well, why wouldn't I? If I have, that's not to say everybody should do, everybody's to-do list should all look the same. But even if it's just a 2-minute, not this documentary, but if a person is just filming 2 minutes of how fast people drive down their neighborhood street past the school, and take that to your city council, like they've got the open mic night at city councils or planning commissions, where like, sign your name, you get 3 minutes. Just show that video. Just let it sink in, so people are just watching 2 minutes straight of just zoom, zoom, zoom on a street that we know could be calmed. And so, for me, with the documentary, it's that kind of thing. I mean, I like it's not as bare bones as just me and a smartphone. I have a lean team to put this together, which is why I got to do the crowdfunding. But but I don't see it as a big lift. I see it as, why is it taking me this long to make it happen if it's been in the idea book for
well, I mean, it's incredible. You think about like the explosion of YouTube and the ability for people to just make and upload their own videos.
Right.
And I like to bug some of my architectural planning colleagues to talk about it. Like, if you want reach, that's where you reach people. Whether you like social media or not, whether you like YouTube or not, there are people. We had some reference the other day at the Strongtown session about social media. I mean, there's like Not Just Bikes, which has like 1 million followers on YouTube, which is incredible.
Yeah,
unbelievable. I mean, that person has far more reach than any of us do coming to our little conferences. And so the power of video is incredible. And so I salute you for trying it. I think that's really cool. I have, like, years ago, I did a couple of videos that I paid somebody to help me do. It's really funny. I still have them up, on my YouTube channel, which I almost never do anything with. And I still get people who like refer to those videos, and one of them was about a street design issue where I actually compared a design of a 5-lane street, the same 5-lane street in a more urban condition and a little bit more suburban condition, and just how, and even though they were both technically 5 lanes, how different the experiences were. And, it was like 4 or 5 minutes long. But I always felt like, God, I wanted to do like hundreds of those. And it would be cool to have more people doing videos like that. I think it clearly reaches more people than anything else that we do.
Yeah. And it goes all the way back to what we were talking about at the beginning, just the very simple storytelling. We have a tendency of overcomplicating everything.
Yeah.
And like this, one thing that I keep going back to with this particular documentary is in talking to 20 different people to feature some of their stories, I realized in talking to 20 people, I'm coming up with notes for 50 different films. Obviously, I can't. So not only can I not make 50 different films right now, I gotta put a fence around this.
Yeah.
And what's the focus? And so coming back to something very simple, like doctor prescribes this, it's good for you, and this other group of experts that controls our behavior is saying, no, you cannot have what's good for you. I don't like that. I'm not willing to sit with that. But that, like, you have that kind of focus. It's just like what you described. The same thing is true with it's a road diet, or you're talking about a setback for property, or About Here is another YouTube channel that's got some great stuff. Like, why are front yard businesses illegal? That's great. Like, I'm not the only one that will sit and watch 15 minutes of walking through, why are front yard businesses illegal? You get a glimpse of what is being held back from you, and it fires you up. My goal with my work is I don't want to ever leave people with I'm mad, and now I'm going to get on Reddit and tear apart the internet because I'm so mad. I want people to get fired up and then do something good. Like, all right, now what? So, or the yes and from improv kind of thing. Like, yes, you're fired up. This is a problem. It's going to get worse. It will keep getting worse unless you do something. And great news, so much of this stuff is fixable at the local level.
Exactly. So, like, what's the next, like, simple task that you could undertake to help with that? Actually, Strong Towns has been great in that regard, and really kind of hammering home that message about, like, finding the next simple thing that you can do. And that, and that ties to, something I know you've written about a lot is you talk a lot just about messaging and really simplifying the messaging around all these issues, and how much we just not just overcomplicate how we think about things, but just how we talk about them. And I wonder if you could talk just for a minute about that. I've talked a little bit about when I had Nathan Norris on about, how bad a lot of us are in this world in terms of messaging generally, and come up with, slogans and complicated ways of talking about things. But why don't you take a minute and talk about that?
So this is like someone in recovery talking about this. So or as Miley Cyrus would say, they say it's the journey to the messy city most people remember most.
Miley, you're welcome to come on.
We extroverts think everything we say is important, and so we fill spaces with words. That's one of our things, and so it's part of why so many presentations are awful. It took me a while to figure that out, because I loved giving presentations. At first, I couldn't figure out, why does nobody want to volunteer at these conferences to give presentations early in my career? And so I would give them like project overviews. I'm no expert, and I'm not delivering it in a timid way, but just knowing my place. I'm no one in this room, and so I'm almost delivering a presentation like I'm asking for, not for validation, but like, can you help me? Was this part right? This access management thing. What about this? But I would overcomplicate by putting so much information into these presentations that I myself would lose sight of the point of my own presentation.
God, that sounds so familiar.
I would have to look back and say, what was the title of this presentation? And then I'd realize, the title was boring as can be. Access Management Regulations in Virginia, 2004, whatever. Instead of, what's the point of this talk? What do I want? What's one thing that people should leave the room thinking about? It's again how the human brain works. And so either we technical types, we can pretend that we'll change how humans function, or we can go with it and say, oh, okay, now understanding how the human brain works, how can I adapt to how the human brain works? One of the people that I'm talking to that's definitely going to be part of the documentary, her name's Angela. She was telling me about some of her backstory as a female combat veteran and the struggles in coming back to normal society, where her family and friends did not understand why she was struggling so much with PTSD. She didn't look wounded, and she felt like, I forget how she worded it, maybe like a shell of a person, but she felt awful and miserable and possibly suicidal. And she was talking about her background in some of these ways. And then while she was telling me her backstory, she goes, I don't know if you've ever heard of New Urbanism, but somebody recommended to me that I needed to, sorry, I'm backing up all over myself. She had tried all the normal prescription responses. So the doctors couldn't help her find the right cocktail of medicines.
Right.
And so she felt like, I'm at the end. I don't know, nothing's working. And I'm miserable and I'm scared for what I'll do to myself. And somebody said, you're so isolated. You're not talking to anybody. You're not seeing anyone. You feel so miserable that you've shut yourself in. You need to walk and see somebody just daily or weekly.
Mm-hmm.
And she was introduced to some town or village. I plug them if I remember the name, but it was a New Urbanism development. And she cut herself off and she goes, New Urbanism saved my life. Like, whoa, stop everything. This is a whole other movie. So like that kind of focus, starting from that point, all right, New Urbanism saved my life.
Yeah.
How is that hyperbole? What? Let's unpack that a little bit. Because if you're giving a 3-minute talk or a little 6 or 7 minute Pecha Kucha kind of thing, or you're standing in front of planning commission or city council, or whatever it is, a project interview for a contract. If you have something like that, maybe you don't want to make the selection panel cry at an interview, but there are a lot of personal stories like that woman saying, New Urbanism saved my life. Then like going from there, it's like, how? It's almost like Hitchcock's suspense beats, because you start with something shocking and then you kind of work your way through, and then maybe there's another shocking point, like, and then this happened, and then you kind of work your way through. But all of it goes back to simplify. What is the point? Because none of us care if there's no point. Like, one thing that's interesting, I think is interesting, is every couple of years we'll see those statistics about our attention span, and is it at goldfish level of 7 seconds or 9 seconds? And so from a marketing point of view, you have this much time to capture somebody. And I found myself, when I would first start seeing those years ago, like, oh yeah, I gotta hook them. And there's truth to that. There are things that you absolutely have to hook someone right away. So a YouTube thumbnail that has certain types of font will capture somebody in a way. A commercial for something will capture people. So there is that element. But another thing that's also true is if the storyline is engaging or the content is engaging, even if it's not just personal story after personal story, people will absolutely tune in. Like Joe Rogan's podcast, biggest in the world, is 3 hours of one-on-one conversations. Like people will listen if something is compelling.
Right.
And so the same can be true for New Urbanists. Whether we're talking to just each other, we're at an event, we're delivering, we're making a documentary, like whatever it is, if we can focus on the simple, why are we doing this? What is the point?
Mm-hmm.
Then it's not like you have to get in and out in 30 seconds or 6 minutes. There's a lot of there, but it does go back to what you said about you've got to have the essence of it, or like I say, what's the tweetable version?
Yeah.
Is there a tweetable version of a thing? If not, you got problems. You got to refine that.
Yeah, that's great. That's great advice. I feel the pain in a lot of ways because I recognize what you're saying with my own presentations and the difficulty there is in just boiling things down to like one point, because that is really the reality. I mean, most people attending, even most really smart people are going to watch a presentation. They're thinking they're probably going to take one thing away from it, maybe two, but it's not much. One last topic here. I know it looks like people might be starting to stream in the room here soon, but you can help me with this one. I have to lead a presentation tomorrow about AI and the impact of AI on just our cities, our professions. You had an interesting little post about it recently that was much more optimistic than what I think you often read in the press about AI. So I wonder if you want to tell me what I need to know, how I need to prepare for this tomorrow.
I am sorry that I'm not going to be in that presentation. I would love to see it. So I'm looking forward to. I'm sure you will write about it later, and I will read what you write. I'm not an AI expert, but I like technology, and I like it as a tool, just like a car as mobility. Like it's one tool. It can be used. Water, water can be used to give life or take it away. Like you can drown in too much water.
Right.
AI and large language models like ChatGPT, it's that to me, it's that same kind of thing. It's a tool, and so I've been reading a lot about and listening to very long form podcast interviews with people technologists who are going on for 30 minutes, 90 minutes about different aspects of artificial intelligence and in different applications. So for some it's software, for others it's mobility, for others just all kinds of applications. And I just keep coming back to we're not going to stop. It's the genie in the bottle kind of situation. Like it's not going back in. We're not going to stop that type of, now that we have this ability, I'm including myself as if I can do anything with artificial intelligence. But there are certainly ways to apply this to the work that we do. So even the things that are now available to consumers, like the ChatGPT, I've been testing it out as a research assistant. And sometimes it's like, I say research assistant and I'm visualizing a college student or a high school student, because it will often pull very good work that you would never have found just Googling references to something like find me 10 projects that fit the following criteria. And, you list what you're looking for, you tell it your goal, and then you basically have a conversation like, this is what I'm looking for. And it will come up, 3 of the 10 will be these off the wall things you thought, that's weird. And then you read it and you go, oh, that does connect to what I was thinking. Just like if you had a high school kid run to the server and find folders, they'll inevitably come back with something that you go, how on earth did they come up with that?
Yeah.
And yet there's something you can use. I mean, not always. There's a lot of time. And then sometimes, frankly, their answers are just flat out wrong.
Yeah.
And you get that too. So my take on that, like the stuff that's accessible to us now, is how might we use it? So I'm a big fan of what if questions. So what if I used it in this way? How are photographers using it? How are journalists using it? And then also, how are people not using it well? So to me, all these things are interesting. I definitely don't see this as self-driving Terminators coming through and taking over, because I don't know. I just don't.
Yeah, interesting. I think that's fascinating. I think there's something there I can use, and I mean, that's my brief experience. Yeah, I'm certainly no expert on it as well, but my brief experience is a lot of it is, at least where the technology is now, it will obviously change in advance, but where a lot of it is now is it's sort of beginning to replace low-level tasks, first order things, so like first drafts. And I think if people think of it that way right now, is there's a lot that it produces that's very imperfect and everything else. But if it's like, but that's a first draft and it did it in 5 seconds.
Right. And you know what it comes out, the people that criticize, or the best and harshest critiques of what something like a large language model does looks like corporate websites.
Yes.
I will not name several of former employers, but if you look at the stuff that gets generated, it's junk writing. And when you look at it like, this is why ChatGPT is junk. Yeah, that is junk. Also, look at this major corporation's mission page and about page and their blog. It's awful.
Yeah.
So maybe now that you've identified what crappy writing looks like, go back to your website, do a little tweaking, and figure out your messaging.
Yeah.
Figure out, why am I here? What do we do here? Why should any client care about us? How do we talk about the work that we do?
Yeah, that's great. We didn't get to talk much about biking. Maybe we'll have to do this again at some point. I know you're a big cycling advocate, but I do want to wrap it before the room gets too crowded, because I think we're about to be overwhelmed. But so I always like to wrap to asking people if they have a favorite sort of place that fits a messy city description. A neighborhood, a city, anything at all that feels like it fits that vibe. What comes to mind for you?
The two immediately come to mind. One is, so I'm based in Richmond, Virginia, and one neighborhood is Shockoe Bottom, which is dirty and grimy, and I love it. it is literally a messy city down there. It's I don't know.
Richmond's got incredible neighborhoods too, all over the place.
So that is a particular neighborhood that I adore. But then also Charlotte. We're here in Charlotte, North Carolina, and for very different reasons. It's not grimy, but I was talking to somebody yesterday about this, how, again, things can get better in the end. There's so much physical space already. There are plenty of parking lots to do something incredible with. There's a lot of overbuilt roads through downtown. We all know that. We walk around seeing 4 lanes, one way coming at us, things like that. But there's potential there, and already you're seeing things. I think that's part of why CNU is here in Charlotte. Like there's things are happening already in the last several years, and it's new-ish building mixed with old building, which is fun. I mean, that's classic Jane Jacobs kind of thing.
Right.
Like, mix it up a little bit. Don't put all your stock in just new buildings.
Right.
So yeah, that's my long-winded messiness.
Well, and there's obviously, Charlotte has come a long ways too, and the downtown has changed remarkably in the last 20 years. So it's really a very new city in a lot of ways, at least as we experience it today. And I think a lot of people maybe are unfamiliar with that notion, but it was not a terribly large city, 50 years ago, but it's boomed, and as a result, they've seen just a flood of growth in town, out of town, suburbs, and they have all the sort of things that every city has, but they've had a real focus on their downtown and urbanizing it, and done some really nice things. So
yeah.
All right, Andy, thanks for doing this.
Thanks
Appreciate
for having me. For all the information on the documentary, you should go to urbanismspeakeasy.com.
urbanismspeakeasy.com, and you're also on Substack, and Twitter.
It'll redirect right there. urbanismspeakeasy.com will take you right to Substack.
Okay. What's your Twitter handle?
It's my last name, Baino.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Great.